All right, so it looks like we have an anonymous Ifrit. Hi, anonymous Ifrit. It's great to have you joining us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk you through the document first, and then what I'd like to do is spend the majority of the time really focusing on your questions. You guys have all used Quill in the past, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So really I just want to make sure we're focused on answering your questions. So this document, I've got a couple important links. The Quill expert link, this is a document I've been developing with teachers. I joined the Quill team in August. I've been developing it with teachers since then. So if you have notes to add, if you have best practices you want to share, if you want to learn a little bit more about the tools and how other teachers are using them, you can use that link. The support page is pretty extensive and it's getting more extensive all the time. If you go there, you can search articles and find out if there's something specific you want to know how to do, you can find it there. I also created a demo so that when I'm talking today, I can share a couple specific things with you using student data. But since you guys are already using this, you probably won't need to access the demo. You can just look at your own account. It sounds like everyone's got the getting started information, so we don't need to focus on that today. And so I wanted to just walk you through the Q&A that I've answered, and then I wanted to talk to you all. Have you gotten a chance to try lessons mode yet?
No.
Okay, I wanted to walk you through lessons mode because that's a pretty cool tool that we just released a couple months ago, and it's been making a big difference for teachers.
Are there lessons 6th grade in lesson mode?
Yes. So one of the things about Quill is that we focus on the skill and not the grade level, right? So if you've mastered the skills, you will be able to you'll be able to move on to the next assignment. So based on the level of the skill, the text usually mirrors the level of that skill, right? So, we see, like there are 2nd grade Common Core writing standards that seniors in high school still need. That text will work for a 2nd grader or for a senior, right? So those lessons will mirror the skill and not be out of range for a 6th grader.
Okay.
Okay, so under the Quill questions and answers, the specific questions I got from grade 6, I've gone ahead and answered here. The big one here, I think, is the question about what to do after students finish the recommended tasks, right? So the first thing here to think about is the big question for me is how are they applying what they're learning from Quill, right? I'm sure that's the question that's in your mind too. When I'm using Quill, like any other ed tech tool, it doesn't work very well in a vacuum. It works really well when kids are asked to take what they're doing on Quill and move it beyond the page. So there are 2 things you can do to make sure kids are really strengthening their skills. The first one, and what I call this for students, is going for green, right? So if you look, this is an image of the student dashboard right here. And while this student doesn't have any reds, this is usually a pretty good mirror of what you would see in an account. You'll have some assignments where they have a green, right? That means that they have 80% or above. They've shown mastery on that skill. And you'll have some where they have a yellow and some where they have a red. When I talk to students, I talk about green being great job, yellow being try again, and red meaning ask for help, right? So the reason I think of it that way is because if they're in the 60 to 80% range, usually doing it again, they'll be able to read the hints and get closer to mastery. When they're in the red, it often suggests sort of a gap in understanding, maybe a place where they could use a little teacher intervention. I really like to encourage the students to come to the teacher about it, but you also have this in your visual overview so you can see the assignments and decide what conversations you want to have. What I find is usually after you walk through, if a kid comes to you with a red, we'll say open the assignment, we'll walk through a question together, and it's usually pretty quick to see what misconceptions they have, and then they can move forward from there. Any questions about the go for green?
Nope.
Cool. The next one here, and this is really for me one that's super important, is the Quill extension activities, right? So this is how do I get out of Quill and start working on this skill. Do you guys use writer's notebooks at all?
Some with journals.
Yeah, we have journals. Yeah.
Great. So that's one of the places that I usually have students start, right? So if I'm looking back here at my skills, right? So I know that I've mastered compound subjects, objects, and predicates lesson. So what I can do is I can click on replay the activity and I can pull up the example from that. I can write down the example for myself. And then I can go to my notebook and work to either add sentences using that structure or change the shape, or to go back and revise sentences based on that skill, right? Especially if they're working on the puzzle piece or the grammar skills, that's going to make a really big difference for them, is if, you know, like if they go back and read through their writing and check for that. Another thing I found that some teachers have really enjoyed doing with their students is having kids proofread each other's with a skill that they learned, right? So I practiced once, since, and so that, and now I'm going to edit a classmate's paper and see if there are places where they could add those words to clarify their sentences, right? So then you add a conversation element in where they can make that revision and then explain the rule to their classmate. So those are just a couple of the ways. I will say that in terms of Quill skills, if you have students breaking down 1 to 2 Quill skills a week over the course of the year, right? So no matter what pace they've worked at this point, if they're working on like introducing and looking through their writing for one of these Quill skills each week, you're going to start to see that have more impact overall, right? The more that they are looking for those in their writing, the better. In New York, there's a lot of folks that use sort of the reading and writing workshop model, and in that model, they all keep a writing notebook. And so in those cases, we have them write down the skills that they practiced on Quill as they go and use it like a checklist whenever they're editing a paper, right? I've looked for this, I've looked for this, I've looked for this. Questions? All right. So the next thing here is thinking about what you want to add to their overall curriculum, right? They've gotten green on the recommendations. I've reissued the diagnostic. It's showing that they're still getting, they're still getting things correct overall, right? None of the activity packs have been reassigned to them as a result of like them not actually demonstrating understanding. That's really the big point of reassigning the diagnostic, is just to see if there's anywhere where they haven't really retained the information from the first round, right? So once they go back and do the diagnostic without the feedback from the program, are they able to correctly identify and correct the sentences? So the next stage from here are all the things that you can do. I'm going to pause on this one because I want to walk through lessons, and then I want to just mention a couple other things. How do I use reports for grading purposes? That was a big question across grades. The simple answer is there is no one-to-one translation for Quill right now. This is something I've really been pushing for since I joined the team in August. And over the course of the January through March development cycle, we're going to be working on developing out mastery-based learning. Right now, I'm just aiming for one report that gives you a summary and an average, and hopefully we'll have that done by early January. But, you know, it's all caught up in all the other development things that we have to do. So I will walk through these 3 different ways that you can look at it and that you can determine which one's the best way to sort of translate it into something for your grade book. And then I'll show you how to delete activities. And then, of course, this is back to the same question about Quill data. Any other questions that you want to add to this list that you'd like me to answer while we're on this call?
I don't have anything right now. I don't think so.
Okay. If you think of anything else while we're going, just let me know, and we'll see where we can go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with lessons, because this is a pretty cool tool, and I'm really pumped about it, so hopefully you will be too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the demo here, and you guys can actually join my classroom. Give me 1 second while I can. So for lessons, when I go to my diagnostic, after students have completed the diagnostic, not only is it going to provide recommendations in terms of independent work, so I'm here under recommendations, not only in terms of independent work, but also in terms of collaborative lessons. So if I look here, it seems like every student in my class needs help with the complex lessons pack, so that's one I'm going to focus on. Now this one, the compound subjects, objects, and predicates, only 20% of my students need this work, so this might be something that I do with a small group rather than with the whole class. Let's go ahead and look at the compound sentences lesson pack. Just assign that. And I'm going to go ahead and preview a lesson. Oh, this is super exciting. It looks like their customization might be out today. So one of the things, you won't see the lesson, but one of the other things you'll see is we've just gotten to the point now where you can customize your lesson, which means you can edit it and make it fit whatever you want it to for your class. So right now, I don't have the student version. So I'm not going to have you guys log into the student version right now, but I'm going to open up the student view so you can see what that looks like, and I'll just swap back and forth. So you can see I'm the student that's just joined this class, and I'm James Joyce in this case. And this is what my deck looks like. So we've got the skill, and then we have an objective for the lesson, right? Obviously, it's pretty straightforward here. Now, these lessons are designed to be both used by brand new teachers who, like me, maybe never had any grammar instruction when we were in school, and also by veteran teachers who can edit it and sort of make it work towards whatever they think their students need to be doing. So with the lessons here, you can sort of see a walkthrough at the beginning of what the information is. The slides that students see are going to automatically show up when you switch slides, right? So this is my student slide right here. If I switch to slide number 3 in my student view, slide number 3 is going to come up. So you are basically, once students log into their account, they can join the lesson. And once they've joined the lesson, they can go ahead and see whatever you are seeing on your screen. Now, this, what we see here, this would be on a teacher screen. And then we have a projector version. So if you, I don't know, the unmirroring part can be complicated, so we have some instructions there. But basically, this is the screen that goes up in front of the entire class. And then you have access to your teacher model right here. I hope that showed up for you. Did it show up?
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure this shows up. Right, so you can see right here what the version is that's class facing. This is the version on the teacher screen, and this is the version on my screen facing me. And that'll become important in a second. So when we get into the practice for Quill, students can actually write in and submit their answers. So that's how this would look, right? So I'm just going to write in some nonsense. Right? And now I'm going to look back here at my lesson. Now I can see which student has submitted an answer right here, and I can see their answer. Notice on the whole class version, you can't see anyone's answer right now. What I can do is I can select that answer, and I can display it to the class. So now my student can see it on their screen, and it'll show up in front of the class. Now we number them, we don't put names by them. You can share the names if you want, but we don't put them up there so that if you want to have students do a comparison of them, they can with no judgment. A couple of the other cool features here with these lessons, you can make a student retry it. So say that your students do what some of my students do, and they write IDK as a response to things, or I don't know. You can press that retry button I just clicked, and it's going to boot it right back to the student, and they're going to have to write their answer again. I have to stop displaying answers. I always forget that part. You can type in. And I can submit it. So now in my teacher version, I have this new one. Now, say that I am done sharing answers, but I'm looking through the answers and I have a few kids. Maybe I have some students who didn't complete it. Maybe I have some students who, even after they had a chance to redo it, still didn't give me a very good answer. I can flag those students. What that means is as I go through the lesson, I'm going to be notified with that little blue flag to look at that student and see what's going on. So when I go on to the next question, once the student has answered that, I can check that flag student. When I get to the end of it, sorry, what'd you say?
Do they know if they've been flagged?
They do not know. They see nothing if they've been flagged. So at this point during lessons mode, we don't provide them any information about who's flagged and who's not flagged. Now, when you come to the end of the lesson here, you'll see that you can see exactly who's been flagged. You can also show students who haven't been flagged. So at this point, you have the choice. I can unflag or reflag students based on what I see. See it in the preview, but what will happen when you do the actual lesson is slide, you have the option, and I'll just go ahead and pull up right here. You will have the option to see, to push students off into assignments in different ways. So what that means is you're giving students the chance, right? So you can see here, I flagged a student. Let me keep moving through. This is what it looks like here. All right, so here we are. If I look at this page, here are the students I've flagged. What I can do is I can select small group instruction and independent practice. What that will do is any student who is unflagged will be moved to independent practice, an activity aligned with the lesson you just did. And then the other students will be held in the small group instruction, right? So they'll just get a screen that says, hold tight, your teacher will be with you shortly. And then you can say, anyone with the screen, come join me and we will work through this lesson together. So that's a really great way to sort of quickly differentiate. One thing I've seen teachers do that was a really strong practice was occasionally the small group, the people they flag will be the struggling students, and occasionally they will flag the kids who are really excelling, and then they'll meet with those students about how they can turnkey that skill to the rest of the class. So there are a couple different ways that you can use that. Now, you don't have to pull students at that point. You can just save that flagged information for later. You can send them all to practice. You can wait and have them do the practice at a different time. So these are the different things that we're pretty excited about with lessons mode. And really the purpose here, is if you read through these lessons, is to engage students in conversation around the skills, right? There's something that you can get from working independently. There's something more that you get from talking to students about their choices, right? So the more that we can really demonstrate for students, here are a couple different choices you and your classmates made and how to write this sentence. There might be multiple correct answers. Why would you choose one sentence over the other, right? Questions about lessons mode?
No, I don't think so.
No, so.
Yeah, so, and then of course, the length of lessons really depends on how much time you have to dedicate to them and how long you want to discuss, right? You don't have to do every slide. So if you want to pick one big one and really focus on that as the area of discussion, that's a really great way to go. All right, so let's see where we were next on our list. We talked through lessons. Okay, so we're talking about assigning other things right now. So my students have completed the recommendations. What can I do next? One of the things you can do is you can go back, you can check out our featured activity packs. So these are activity packs that teachers have created that have been, really helpful to students based on where they saw areas of need. This includes everything from commonly confused words to basic fragments and different skills in different ways. So you can scroll through there and pick any one of these activity packs and you can assign it across the board. You can go back, you can reassign the diagnostic and then have kids go back and repeat things, areas in which they're still struggling. The thing that we consider about the diagnostic is once students have mastered those skills, everything on Quill should be accessible to them as a learning tool. Those are sort of the main things that we want them to start with before they can start getting into all the more advanced activities. Another thing to note is that we are gradually building out these content-based activity packs. So you can see here's one on the age of exploration, and you will find these different skills that students are working on. So this will include actual passages or language related to that specific topic. So that can be something that's really helpful if that's something you're studying. That's a conversation you can have with your students. And a lot of these really rely on those more advanced skills. So this is one of those areas where you might consider the diagnostic recommendations prerequisite for working on these lessons. And then the last thing you can do here is you can create your own activity packs. This is an area where a lot of teachers go back to the proofreading passages or the grammar passages based on where students are seeing the most areas of struggle, right? So I can assign a group of different proofreading passages to students and ask them to complete one proofreading passage before they revise their paper. In general, I found that these passages are best used before students do essay revision because it forces them to read with precision and then look over all the places where they missed information. So when I've seen teachers use this and then push students out to do their writing work, I think it's made a difference rather than sort of using it out of context of looking critically at writing. Questions or thoughts so far?
No questions. How about you, Mark?
No.
Okay. Great. All right. So the next thing we were talking about here was grading. And now this is an area, like I said, Quill's building out some stuff in terms of mastery-based learning that will be out soon. Right now, it takes a little bit of cobbling together for grading, and I want to be really honest about that, so you'll be as excited as I am when the mastery-based grading stuff comes out. So there are a couple different ways that you can look at this. With your advanced reports, there was a question about percentages. You can view the percentages on student scores right here. So my student names are blanked out for some reason. I've never really figured out why. Yours should not be. But what you can see here are student scores across the board in assignments. So you can also sort by assignment, and you can issue grades this way. Now, one of the things that's complicated about this is because each student is completing different activity packs and different activities, it's difficult to sort of enter those into a grade book overall. So I'll tell you sort of how Quill views student success so that you can consider how that would fit into your class. What we consider success is when students have gotten 200 sentences correct. So here's how the math works out on that. That's about 20 activities on Quill. Each activity is about 10 sentences. So that's about a total of 200 sentences correct. That's, you know, if you consider an essay is 30 to 35 sentences, that's a number of like essay lengths in terms of the sentences they've written correctly. And then what we've noticed is that point is the point at which the intervention has sort of been completed, and we really start to see an impact in student learning. So if I'm thinking about after the first quarter of working with my students, I'm looking that they will have at least 50 sentences correct, right? We won't worry so much about the incorrect because we want students to have as many opportunities as possible to get there. Overall, though, this is what I'm considering. You can consider the percentage of correct or incorrect. Right now, this is a total from the beginning of the year. So if they had 29 incorrect at the beginning of the year, they're always going to have 29 incorrect, even if they get every sentence right from here on out. So that'll become a smaller and smaller portion of the percentage, but that means students could never get 100% in terms of their sentences. It's just something to be aware of. And then you can also consider it just in terms of the total of sentences, right? If you have a goal for your class, you're going to complete this many activities over the course of the semester. If you divide this by 10, that's about how many activities they've completed. It's about that.
The number of questions by 10?
Yes, yeah, the number of questions by 10. And that'll be how many activities they've completed. Okay, so let me look back at our list here to see what other questions, concept reports. Okay, so the last one here is activity analysis. So if there's a specific activity, so say there was like one grammar tool, right? Like you've got the theirs, and it's just driving you nuts. So you assign that activity across the board. You can come here and you can look at the report for a specific theory. So here, the after all those sins, I'm going to preview my report, and I can see all of my students who have completed this activity and what their score is, right? So you can say this is their score at their first attempt. Now, the nice thing about this, one of my goals is to make sure that Quill's showing progress better. Currently, we only show their most recent score. Now, you'll notice that we don't ever lock students out of assignments, and that's a very deliberate choice on our part. We want to make sure that students are always working towards the next score, right? So if I get red, I'm trying it again, I'm working towards a higher score. So you can say to students, I'm taking your scores as of X date, and whatever you have is what's going to go in the grade book. So I can look across the board and see that Charles got a 55%, and it doesn't matter if that he's attempted it 3 times, that's where he's at, right? So this is another way you can do that if you want to look at a few specific assignments. Of course, this can be complicated because not every student will have completed every single one of the assignments based on what they've been recommended. So I would do it based on, this is something I decided across the board I was going to assign to all students. Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Awesome. All right. And then the last one here that we got was over assigning activities. So in terms of over assigning activities, you have 2 cases here. One case is I just assign all of the recommendations, but I don't actually want kids working on all the activities quite yet. If I go to my activities and I click on my activity packs, you can scroll through and you can delete activity packs. right? So you can just delete from here. If you want to unassign it from certain students, you can click on Edit Classes and Students, and I can change who's doing this, right? Now, this is an important note, and it's going to show up in big red letters wherever you look. If students have already done something in that activity pack and you unassign it, that data will not be visible to you anymore. We do archive all of the data, so if you accidentally remove a student, you can let us know, and we can usually recover that and make that available to you again. But please be careful to not unassign something that the student has already completed. So if it's something that none of the students have started yet, it's no problem. You can just delete the activity pack and move on very happily with your life. The other thing that you can do in terms of activity packs is using due dates to elevate something to the top of the student's page. So if I'm looking at right here, you can see these different activities. I can put a due date in. Whatever the nearest date is will be the activity that shows up at the top of the page. Whatever the farthest away date is will show up at the beginning of the page. The other thing you can do is you can backdate things if you don't want them to show up until the very bottom of the page, right? So I'll say this is due, maybe it was due last week, right? So it was due in October, so that assignment's now going to get booted to sort of the bottom of what students see. So those are a couple different ways you can work with that. Like I said, for the most part, we don't do too much in terms of unassigning because we want to avoid teachers deleting data that their students have already completed. Questions?
No.
Okay, great. So that should be all the major stuff. The lesson is a really big new feature. I'd love to have you guys, and I'll let you know when our mastery-based stuff starts coming out. I would look at in lessons as well the fact that you can customize them now, which means you can create your own slides in which students participate. You can create model slides where you actually do the answer for students, right? You walk through how you would do it, and that information shows up on their slide in front of them. So those are a few things that you can try out right away that should make a significant difference in the experience for your students. Other than that, the last thing I usually like to do, you have access to this document, is share my email address with you, becca@quill.org. You can feel free to reach out to me at any point if you have questions. If there's anything your students are struggling with, please let me know. Oh, this is the one last point I wanted to make. There are cases in which we are training an algorithm to recognize student responses, right? So all of those Quill Connect activities, we are actually having someone sit down and look through hundreds and hundreds of student answers to provide individualized feedback. So we train the algorithm to recognize the answers that look a certain way and give certain feedback. Occasionally what that means is that a student will write a sentence that follows all of the rules, that meets all of the criteria, and the algorithm doesn't recognize it yet. It's not too often, but it does happen. I get really excited when that happens because that means we have an opportunity to improve the algorithm for all of our student users, which is like 600,000 kids right now. So what I ask you to do is just email me take a screenshot of it, email me, and then what I can do is I can send you sort of a personalized note back for the student who did that. What I found was when I challenged students to outsmart the algorithm, kids came up with some really unique sentences that still followed all the rules, but that, just sort of said it in a new way. So that's something you're absolutely welcome to challenge your students to do, and we really appreciate that. I have noticed in my time at Quill that the glitchiest activities are the grammar activities.
Oh.
Speaking of glitches.
Yeah, we may have lost you.
Those were the first things. But so that would be, can you hear me still?
It's been off and off.
Yeah, you keep cutting out.
Gosh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the other thing is I have noticed that occasionally a grammar activity will not recognize a correct sentence, right? So they'll have written a sentence that's identical to the right answer, and it's not registering. If that's the case, once again, just take a screenshot and send it to me. I can fix Quill grammar activities within 20 minutes of you identifying the error. So just let me know, and we'll update those activities. It's, you know, one of the things that we have to rely on a lot is we're an 8-person team. We're a very small organization, and we try to keep small so that most of our funding can go into keeping the prices low for schools and providing better services. What that means is we really rely a lot on our community to let us know what you need and where you see mistakes so that we can fix those and address those with you. All right?
One thing I noticed, it seems like the kids with the max, when they hit comma, it won't recognize it as a comma.
Interesting. That's something I haven't noticed before. The next time you see that happen, could you just screenshot and do the whole browser and everything, so that I can have my team, what we can do is go into that student's account and try to figure out exactly what the bug is. But I'm going to write that down in my bug report over here. And have you noticed that in, like, specifically in grammar activities or sort of across the board?
Specifically grammar.
Okay, that's a good one for us to look at. Anything else? I'd love to hear any other feedback you have right now.
I can't think of anything right now, but I'll start writing them down.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And please feel free. I mean, it doesn't need to be a form or email. It can be one line, you know, this is happening, and then I have an opportunity to either look into it myself or assign a teammate to do it.
Great.
Cool.
Right. Okay, if there are no other questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So once again, please feel free to email me at any point if you have any questions. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing how things go, and thanks so much for using Quill.
All right, cool. Thank you.
All right, take care.